Chris Oatley's ArtCast, episode 93. Art, Fear, and Finding Your Calling. A conversation with Claire Keane, Brian McDonald, and Jenn Ely. Part 2. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of Chris Oatley's ArtCast. I'm Chris Oatley. A former Disney artist, gone rogue, I'm now the director of the Oatley Academy of Visual Storytelling, where I get to work every day with the most positive, passionate, collaborative community of creatives I have ever known. You can find more art and story podcasts from some of the most inspiring voices in animation, games, VFX, comics, and new media at oatleyacademy.com/shows. In part 1 of this two-part series, Claire Keane, Brian McDonald, Jenn Ely, and I announced the Story Design Conference, a 5-day educational experience we created to help you become the great visual storyteller you're meant to be. We were planning to hold the conference in the spring, but I failed to realize what so many potential attendees communicated to us immediately following the announcement. You need more than 2 months to make international travel plans. So we moved the dates. This year's conference will now take place in the fall, September 28th through October 2nd, 2016. It will still take place in the awe-inspiringly beautiful city of Rome, Italy, and the guests and curriculum, which will focus on color, composition, and character development, will also remain the same. Visit oatleyacademy.com/go/Rome. Again, that's oatleyacademy.com/go/Rome to find out more and register for the event. In celebration of our announcement, we decided to have a conversation about some of the big ideas we'll be discussing during the conference. In part 1, we talked about why you might never find your calling, and why that's a good thing, how the most intimidating problems can also be the most inspiring, and why fear never goes away no matter how successful you become. You can find part 1 of this interview at oatleyacademy.com/nofear1. That's NOFEAR and the number 1. Now in part 2, we'll discuss how to convey emotion through your work, what makes student work stand out, how to keep going when you feel defeated, and what we're looking forward to at the Story Design Conference. Because we moved the dates, we also reset the timer on the amazing early bird rate. So again, go to oatleyacademy.com/go/Rome to find out more and register. And now here's part 2 of my stirring conversation with Claire Keane, Brian McDonald, and Jenn Ely. I've had a lot of questions recently about conveying emotion through your work. And it's always been interesting to me, but I've become fascinated with this idea recently, just absolutely fascinated with it. The idea of mark making and how a mark truly can evoke an emotion, and that emotion can be kind of universal. Oftentimes, yeah, depending. I've been thinking a lot about Vincent van Gogh. I think about Vincent van Gogh all the time, but I've been thinking about him in a different way recently because of our friend Adam Westbrook's recent video about Vincent van Gogh. He did a video essay called Painting in the Dark, and it's about flow and pressing through the struggle, and highly recommended for anyone listening to this interview. Anyway, my point is I've just been thinking about Van Gogh, for example, and how he was obsessed with this idea of containing this abstract emotion or this abstract kind of human experience in a painting, right? In a permanent piece of work. And that's what's so incredible about storytelling, right? Is the ability to take the abstract or the spiritual and make it a thing, make it a real thing that other people can look at or experience and experience some sort of emotional and spiritual connection react to each other because of it. It's amazing. And it's one of the things that drives me most as an artist. So I'm interested in whatever thought you've given to this idea of deliberately trying to convey an emotion through your work. And I know, Brian, you've written at length about this idea. And so maybe you could start us off.
What have I said about it? I don't usually read my stuff. I just
well, I mean, that's the whole, in many ways, the premise of Golden Theme, right? I mean,
well, that's true.
It's this idea of, humanity and the human experience and how we find that in truly good stories.
Yeah, I think that the key is always, it's a weird thing because it's an external thing, right? A piece of art, a piece of writing is an external thing, but it's an internal process. And if you don't have the emotions when you're creating the thing, if you're not tapping into them, they won't be there. There's no technique that will put them there, right? Yeah. You have to have them. And you just have to be naked on the page that way.
Wow.
And that can be really hard for people to do. In a lot of my classes, we do improv exercises because improv is a way of breaking down that people hide. They think they can hide behind their art. Like, well, I don't want to be in front of people. It's like, well, what do you think art is? You're in front of people in ways that you can't even imagine. It's you there. It's you up there. If it's not you, it's no good. And you have to risk them rejecting you. And that's really hard for people. So you have to have the emotion. I had to write a scene. I had a pacifist character in a screenplay, and he had to kill somebody. It was just part of the thing. And I didn't want him to. And I remember I had to get into this character's space. And then I went home, and my girlfriend's like, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Oh, this guy had to kill a guy today." And I was really upset about it because I had to go through the experience. I had to have it for other people to have it. That's all I can say about it, I think, is that you have to have the emotion in order to convey it.
Yeah, I would also, kind of along those lines, is that the emotion kind of comes with what you're trying to say. An emotion without context can be kind of difficult. I mean, I'm thinking of the students who are creating portfolio pieces kind of in the void, and it's kind of difficult to create an image about fear if there's no story in their head behind that or something, But I guess emotions are completely dependent on context.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting idea because I was just kind of listening to Brian talk and thinking about it because I agree with a lot of things that you both said, but I was just thinking about how it's funny that the context is so important. The context matters so much. But in the same way, that context is actually insignificant to the emotion. Like, you need that specific context to be honest, right? For it to come from an honest place.
Yeah.
But me looking at it, I don't have to be exactly like you and have been in that exact situation to connect to that.
That's
right?
So funny.
Right.
Yeah. It's like the connecting force between all of these different contexts that we could potentially be in. But the emotion is the thing that links us all together, because in the end, there's only like so many emotions that are part of the human existence, and we share those.
Yeah, there's a massive shared experience, and our brains are everything about us. We want to connect the dots. We want to connect with each other. We want to feel what the person next to us is feeling. It's why we go to movies. It's why we, listen to songs and things like that. We have these things that connect us together as human beings. And I think that's one of the most important things. I also think another really important thing to me that I find really exciting is like, it doesn't matter that you have this like highly honed, realistic style that's like super advanced. You can pick up a pencil and draw stick figures and communicate something to me if you have a context, if you have an honest perspective and you are sincere. Like I can watch a Don Hertzfeldt thing or like a,
about to say.
Yeah, or like, Eleanor Davis. I think about her all the time because she makes these little comics and little drawings and stuff. And there was this one that was like just about anxiety and just about all the things that you carry around. And it was like this girl goes into a room and these black snakes come out of her body. And then like she's cleansed in this horrible way. And they leave like orange slices out for her when she comes out. And it was just like, it's so abstract and it's so strange, but you immediately know exactly what she's talking about.
Wow.
From just this silly, like sketchbook, black and white, whatever. Like it's incredible what you can do, picking up a number 2 pencil or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, something we've been talking about a lot lately is this idea of how everything changes in sequence as well. So you guys are talking about context and that kind of thing, and then thinking about the context of a linear story, right? A film or a comic or a children's book. And the idea that contrasts can actually evoke emotion too. So if you go from maybe a real obvious choice would be like a really intense red or orange to a cool purple and blue suddenly, or you go from a super bright color palette to a very desaturated color palette, and the way that those shifts can also start to evoke emotion. And in fact, we'll be getting into some very specific examples at the workshop, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. 3 more questions here. There's all this talk about, common portfolio pitfalls and that kind of thing. And I think all that's very helpful. And I've written some articles that I think students will find helpful. But I'd like to look at that similar kind of question from the opposite angle, kind of hold a mirror up to it. I'm trying to be like Brian McDonald, basically. And this is what I do with my life.
There's no pressure on me.
Valid
exactly.
Lifestyle choice.
It is. It's the only one. But anyway, when you look at the work that is still to you, obviously student work or the work of, I refer to these folks as pre-professional. And when I say that, I mean the work is obviously not quite there yet to the point where you're like, okay, it's just a matter of time until you get hired somewhere, until the clients start calling. And I think maybe you guys know what I'm talking about. It's not clearly student. It doesn't look like beginner work. It's pre-professional. It's kind of like you're almost there. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you see these kinds of portfolios, student portfolios or pre-professional portfolios, feel free to focus in on either of those or talk about them both. What's remarkable? What are the things that stand out to you within that context?
Yeah, for me, what stands out the most is when somebody, kind of going back to what we were talking about in the very beginning, is when they let themselves shine through in their work and that they haven't given into the pressures of trying to look like a certain studio or what the other students in their class are doing, who they are and what makes them shine just comes right through. Yeah. And that is just one, okay, that person, it's going to go somewhere, but also just as an artist, it's really inspiring. Mm-hmm. And when I see an artist that I just feel very inspired by, like I can't help but want to try to open doors for them, just I want to see what you do. I remember seeing Leo Matsuda's portfolio at Cal Arts when he was a student. Oh, wow. And he had also done this amazing short film for his end of the year thing. And it was amazing. It was just so him and completely personal, but he was able to also make it relatable for Disney, but it was still him in this way that was so refreshing. And I was so happy to see when he got accepted into Disney.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. How about you, Mr. McDonald?
Well, it's a little different for me because it's not visual art usually that I'm looking at. So it's usually somebody's writing or directing or something. It's a strange thing because I wish I saw more of what Claire saw when I saw that work. But usually what I see is so much imitation.
Right.
Like if you're of a certain generation, you just want to be Quentin Tarantino. That's just what you want to do. And you see a lot of that and you don't see, I can count on one hand, I think, the stuff that isn't regurgitated.
Yeah.
Or, I guess if somebody has a sense of the history, and that's rare, but occasionally someone has a sense of the history of the craft, and that history will inform you, right? So if you say Billy Wilder and they know who you mean, that matters.
Yeah.
Right? If you say Frank Capra and they know who you mean, that matters because it means they are able to look past the style differences of the time and see the real craft below the surface.
Yeah.
So I wish I saw more of that. I wish I saw more people who understood the history of their craft and studied it. But I see very little of that in the last several years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, this is interesting you bring this up because this is something I talk to my students about all the time, which is this is the easiest thing to do. Like
Right,
this is with an enormous return on investment. You know, like if you were to just study only the films of Billy Wilder, like just Billy Wilder, and you know, or just go learn about Vincent van Gogh and his approach to color theory, like the way he applied color theory to his paintings in a very intentional way. That's all you did, just that one person, that one aspect of his craft. It would inform your work exponentially, and all of that information is there and available. All of those movies are there. You can go get them all, or at least most of them, and easily. It's so easy.
It actually seems like the internet has made information cheap. That people don't, you know, they can look it up, so they don't seek it out the way that we did before the internet.
Right. Yeah, it's always there, so you can kind of, I'll get to that later.
Yeah, it's a strange thing. But but I think you're right. If people just studied one thing or whatever.
Well, I also think that it kind of is rooted in this, in what we were talking about in the beginning, and just kind of getting back to your thing about people imitating other people, that it kind of speaks to this feeling that we're just blind to our own potential and our own talents. And if we could just take the time to study what other people have done and see it as what you were talking about earlier, that they're problem solving. And that's why they got to where they are, is just through problem solving. And for people to understand that, then they could start finding this potential that lies in them.
Yeah, it seems like that is a bit of a maturity thing as well, like looking up, like learning those things. It's following that interest, having that strong interest and following it, and like not doing it because you have a class that you have to know this thing for, or someone's going to ask you this at an interview or whatever, you know, learning it because you're immersed in the community, you're immersed in the medium, and you're watching things and you're interested, like, who made this? Why did they make it this way? Where does this come from? And I think, you know, for me, coming into it later in life, it's something, you know, I know that there are holes in my knowledge, but I'm really interested, and I feel like I stay immersed in like what's happening and what people are making, and because it is actually legitimately fascinating to me. And I think, you know, sometimes people stop and don't ask themselves if they really are as interested in this thing that they say they want to do, you know, at younger ages as well. But like getting back to the portfolio thing, for me, I agree with both of the things that you guys said are totally dead on. I'm really excited when I'm surprised. And that just feeds back into the like imitation thing. Like, I don't want to see, you know, everybody doing the same thing, because that's the thing of the year. Nobody wants to see that. So surprise is really cool. And I mean that as much in like content and like the kinds of things you're trying to say as well. It's not like you're going, I want to show love, and so I'm going to show a very typical scene that you've seen a bunch of times. And it, you know, it's more specific than that. I want to show the love between this particular character and this particular character, and their lives are this, and this is where this is happening, and this is the pinpoint of this moment, exactly what kind of love they're feeling, and, you know, the nuance of that. And that leads to the next thing, which would be specificity, both in the content and that narrative, but also just in the things that you choose to put into an environment, the things that you choose to add to a character or not add to a character. Specificity is so important, and I think it's something that's missing for me in a lot of student work. You know, it'll be a mountainside or a hotel room or a, you know, whatever it is. And it's like, that's a chair. And if I told 20 people to draw a chair, 18 of them would draw that chair, you know? And I think that's a big problem, because you really want to be feeling out every part of this world to make it authentic. I mean, that's what our job is, as, you know, somebody with a visual portfolio like Claire and I would be looking at. That's a really big thing. And then beyond that, and then beyond that, consistency, that surprise and that specificity extends into everything that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and I would also add to that surprise and specificity, you don't have to work that hard at it. It's not like something that you have to work really. If you just bring yourself, truly yourself, and who you uniquely are, you will be surprising, and you will bring specificities that nobody else would bring to it.
Wow.
That's exactly right. Yeah, that's a really good point. What I find often is that people will come to my classes and all they want to be is different, right? And what I've noticed is when people just want to be different, then they're all different in the same way. Right? So they'll come in and they'll say, well, I don't like Hollywood happy endings, so none of my stories are going to have happy endings or whatever, right? Sometimes that's the way the story goes. Sometimes the story has a happy ending. If you're already deciding that that's not what you're going to do, then you're only reacting and you're not creating from a genuine place.
There's actually math about that, about how hipsters end up looking the same everywhere. Because mathematically, if you're somebody who raises your hand when everybody else's hand is down, or puts your hand down when everybody else's hand is raised, that is just as uniform in its way as the other.
It completely is.
Yeah, at dinner last night, my wife and I were talking about what is because that term hipster can have kind of a fashionable kind of tone to it, and it can also have a very negative tone to it. And we were talking about that, and we were talking about how in many ways we make very hipster choices, and for example, or the fact that we're vegetarians, and we try to not have plastic in our house and that kind of thing. So but I guess more that's sort of going into the hippie realm, but this was part of our discussion. The point being, we were talking about exclusion, right? And how there's this strange idea in so much of this just being different in like a reactive way, that it's excluding something it's excluding anything. In your example, Brian, it's Hollywood happy endings, or what you're reacting to something and then just going like, well, I'm not going to do that. But it's this sort of artificial, external, kind of shallow distinction. And it's oftentimes I think in avoidance of, like you were all saying, disclosing the truth of who you are and why you're here on this planet and what you have to share with the world and the story that needs to be told, right? And so anyway, our point being, we were talking about that, about how the most successful, and I'm not talking about finances here, I'm talking about the work. The most successful visual storytellers, whether you're an artist or a writer or a filmmaker or an animator, comics creator, storyboard artist, doesn't matter. It's true across the board. The people who experience the most success in their work are the ones who look at their work as being a thing to include the audience, connect them with each other and help them understand themselves, right? It's like we have another opportunity here to quote Brian, in the sense that art exists to show people who they are, not to show them who you are, but really it's to show them who we are as human beings. And so that posture of just exclusion, or this posture of kind of reactive, like, well, I just don't want to do that. I just want to be a rule breaker, and then kind of being different in the same way. It's just not rooted in honesty. It's not rooted in connection. It's rooted in disconnect.
Yeah. Any kind of knee-jerk response like, I cannot enjoy this because mainstream enjoys this, or I only enjoy this. I think that's another example of the fear we were talking about, because I think it's a lot harder to figure out what your voice is and what you like and what you don't like, and own that thing. Yeah,
it's easier to react, and it's easier to react to the surface of things rather than really try and connect on a deep level.
Well, and to feel like when you put that opinion out there, when you follow that instinct, that there's going to be acceptance, right?
Meaning it's hard to believe that?
Meaning that it's easier to follow that formula, knowing that there's going to be there's a percentage of success with it, and you're going to be able to like slip into a grouping of people. Like, 'cause at the end of the day, like, I think we all want to fit in and feel seen and feel valuable. And I think, when you categorize yourself that way, you can kind of fall into a type and find your community and all of that. But I think it's much harder to do the work of like, what are the contrasts in me? What are the the strange little things that I love, and my guilty pleasures, as well as the things that I really hold on a pedestal that are things of value that everybody recognize. There's a huge gamut, I think, in all of us to the things that we can appreciate. But it's really hard to even hear that voice when you're just kind of like, jumping through hoops to get sausages or whatever, That sounds so bleak, but you know what I mean? It's maybe you don't even realize you're doing it sometimes. Like I've caught myself before, somebody's asking you a question and you've nodded yes before you've actually figured out what the answer to the question is. And you have to go back and say, I'm sorry. I just nodded yes to you. I have no idea why. This is what I actually think about that. Sorry. Just a brain lapse.
Right. Yeah. Again, living in the risk, the perpetual risk. Yeah, that's intense. Big ideas. A lot of big ideas here. No surprise. I spoke with Justin Rodriguez, my good friend, brilliant character designer, on the ArtCast a while ago now. And we talked about the Rapunzel moment where in the movie, she finally gets out of the tower and there's this brilliant sequence where, she's cheering, this is the best day ever. And then this is like a cuts to a shot of her like face down on the ground going like, I'm a horrible person.
That is really great. Yeah, I really love that. It's so complex.
Yeah,
I love it.
Incredible. And kind of an honest depiction of the creative life, right? And what the reality of art making can be. My question to you is, for the people who are listening to this and they're on the floor, face down, they're kind of in that dark moment where it's not even that they can necessarily pinpoint what the struggle is that's overwhelming them. What the true source is. It kind of is a fog of overwhelm, and they just kind of feel generally defeated in the kind of the creative life. What's your advice to them?
I think it's going to be hard. Any action's going to be hard when you're feeling that defeated. Of course, I think, you got to take care of yourself, take a walk, get some exercise, do things that make you feel good, that make you feel confident. And that's just outside of the art sphere. But take a minute to make something for yourself. Decide that you're going to make something not for your portfolio or anything else, but just like getting back to why you like to do this in the first place before there was so much pressure on it. I think when you enjoy what you're doing, when you can relax, that's when you make the most work. And I know it sounds counterintuitive to be able to try to relax because that's, that is a contrast. But if you can find that, if you can try to really just tune out those other things and just make something for fun, I think that can really help. And it can also be a big confidence boost.
Yeah, and on that note, this is about, you good people, but I thought I'd interject something here and just say that this is really present for me right now. And it hasn't been so much that I'm worried about what people think or anything like that. That's not really my reality right now. I'm fortunately kind of not dealing with that. But what I am kind of dealing with is sort of managing my stress level. And the other day I was out painting en plein air and someone walked by and said, "Oh, that just looks so relaxing." And I'm like, "You have no idea how difficult this is. I can't get the bush in the right place. It's not the right color of green. It's just like, and the oil's all over the place. And I got the thing, it's just like, and yet at the same time, as difficult and kind of tense as I might feel when I'm plein air painting or doing charcoal outdoors or that kind of thing, there is something healing about it and something regenerative that isn't the same. I don't really have a negative relationship with creating lessons or podcasts or that kind of thing. There's sometimes I get a little stressed out because of a deadline or something, but not the work. The work doesn't stress me out. But here it's interesting because this work, even though it's really tense and difficult, it is just like you're saying, Jen. It's not for anyone except me. I just love painting. That's it. It's that simple. And there's something about that wonderful simplicity that, despite the fact that it's incredibly difficult, is like this, it just sucks all of the stress away. It just becomes this kind of black hole of stress and anxiety. And I really do leave, I think, every single, and I've made some bad paintings lately, really bad.
Put them out in the snow and hope that an act of God happens.
Yeah, half the painting session has just been kind of rushing and just getting out of the mode of like kind of hurrying up on things and just kind of trying to deal with all the stuff at once and kind of getting out of the mode that I'm trying to get rid of. So it's serving its purpose. The work just isn't very good. But regardless, I think I've come away from every single painting session with a holistic sense of healing. I mean, it's been really remarkable. And I've been doing this for about a year and a half, really steadily. I used to do it a lot. And then I kind of, it was just all digital all the time for a very long time. And I think that was a mistake, quite honestly. And so, to get out with real charcoal or real paint and everything, and to be outside and just not have to worry about, commentary. not have to worry about opinion or anything. It's like, no, I'm just trying to get it right. I'm just trying to get the bush in the right place. It's like, I'm just trying to do that. And it's a simple challenge. It's just been tremendous. I think this is a deep well that I can always return to, I think.
In some ways, I think about it like returning to the gym when you haven't gone in a long time.
Right.
It can be daunting because you're associating all these like problematic things with it. But if you stick with it and you kind of give yourself up to the process of it, it will heal you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And a lot of it comes to the similarity, though, Jen, with what you were saying, which is there's just no performance with this.
No.
There's no other reason than to make a painting, and that's it.
Well, there's also the other thing, which is to not do the work right away. For instance, like for me, I find that I have to. It's like having a good diet, right? I find that I had a friend. She was a filmmaker, and she watched a lot of B movies. That was her thing. Huh. But because she watched a lot of B movies, when she made movies, she couldn't do anything else. She had a hard time, right? And I think you can put out what you take in.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like a diet. It's garbage in, garbage out. Or it's so what happens is sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't like the movies they're making right now. I need to watch something really great. I need to watch a few things really great so I can see what's possible. And it inspires me in a way to sit down and do the work and find some satisfaction in the work. I guess find those things that inspire you. Mm-hmm. Right. Because then you don't have to wrestle the same way. Like, okay, you really should sit down and do this thing. You can make it so that you are chomping at the bit to do it.
Right.
Right. I have to do this. I'm around a lot of illustrators all the time. Mm-hmm. And I don't draw myself. People think I do, but I don't. But I have tons of animator friends and illustrator friends and always have.
Yeah.
And it's funny. They'll see something or they'll read some comic or they'll whatever, and all of them go, oh, I really want to draw right now. I really want to paint right now, and I've heard it so much.
Yeah.
And they can't wait to get to it. And I think that most artists have that thing or those things that will inspire them to do that. I know I do with certain movies. Billy Wilder, if I watch a Billy Wilder thing, I'm in awe. It's a high place to aim for, but it gives me something to aim for, and I can find the joy in it again.
Yeah.
That sometimes gets taken away by the realities of the business or whatever.
That's great. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think travel is another thing that can really reinvigorate.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And also just looking through art books really helps.
Yeah. Okay, friends, here's a little bit of a loaded question for you. What are you most looking forward to about our story design conference in Rome?
I'm really good at saying whatever happens, happens, and however it goes, and what I learn. Actually, I'm thinking about what I'll learn being there.
Me too.
Yeah. And what I find is sometimes when people, again, I see this with students a lot, they'll come in with an agenda. Right? So they'll come in and they'll say, I want to learn how to write subtext, right? That'll be their agenda. Now, I won't know that's their agenda, but that'll be their agenda. And what happens is they will, and I've seen this on my evaluations sometimes, they'll learn a bunch of things. They'll go, oh my God, light bulbs are going off all the time. I learned so many things, well, on and on and on and on and on. But they'll say, I don't know, though, if the class was so great because I didn't learn about subtext. Right. They've disregarded everything else that they've learned. Right. So I'm always just like, whatever I learn is good. Whatever happens is good. And I don't want to close myself off to any part of the experience.
That's great.
I mean, I'm really excited about more of this. Like, I'm excited to watch the classes that you guys are teaching and learn from those. And I mean, it's just so rare to get to sit down and have conversations like this. And, both in listening to other people's answers and thinking like, what do I think about that? It's great. It kind of brings you back to things that should kind of always be there. But it's like Claire was saying at the beginning of just like having to kind of like relearn and re-up yourself on certain ideas and keep them present in your mind, I think that's great. And it's really inspiring and invigorating for me personally.
Yeah, I've realized that recently that there is a lot to think about when you're trying to be a good artist or a good storyteller or a good visual storyteller and kind of do both. There's so much to think about and so much to keep track of that I found that without even realizing it, that's the reason I have so many conversations, many of them recorded and put out on a podcast, but also many of them just in every other aspect of my life every day. And I've realized, that's part of that is me just trying to figure out what I'm doing here, anyway, yeah. So there's that.
Yeah, I would kind of echo what Jenn just said. I'm really looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say about this whole process, just kind of continuing to further this discussion. And also, I'm really just looking forward to being in Rome so much.
I'm very proud of you, Claire, for not just saying pizza. Oh, it's going to be so good. I can't wait. Well, friends, I cannot thank you enough for your time today. I had high expectations for this conversation, and yet you've exceeded them. I can't even begin to express how just routinely impressed I am by all of you, and very much looking forward to teaching alongside of you and with you at the conference. And thank you all again. Let's do a quick round of links here. If you could just tell the good people how they can find you and your work online. Let's start with Claire.
ClaireOnACloud.com, which I am currently updating.
And Jenn?
Just my name, JennEly.com. JenniferEly.com will also get you there. And I'm kind of always building and rebuilding the site as well, but you can find links to pretty much everything else, my Twitter and all of that, from that home base.
And Ely is E-L-Y.
E-L-Y, Jennely. And
Brian?
Well, probably the best thing you can do, you can find me on Twitter at bmcd. Is that what it is?
BMACD 1950.
Yeah. And then you can go to my blog, which I need to get back to, but there's still good stuff on there. Invisible Ink blog, blogspot.com. Yeah.
And we, of course, will link to everyone's site and Twitters and so forth in the blog post associated with this podcast episode, which you can find at oatleyacademy.com/NoFear2. That's NOFEAR and the number 2. Okay, friends, thank you again. Thank you so much. And I'll see you in Rome. Good God.
Thank you, Jenn. Thank you, Claire. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you guys.
Thanks to you. Thanks all of you.
All revved up. You can share your thoughts on this episode and share it on social media. Wink, wink. At oatleyacademy.com/NoFear2. That's NOFEAR and the number 2. You can register for the Story Design Conference with Claire Keane, Brian McDonald, and Jenn Ely, which will now take place September 28th through October 2nd, 2016 at oatleyacademy.com/go/Rome. In the previous episode, I mentioned that I would share the entire conference itinerary in this episode, and I don't know what I was thinking when I made that plan. We geeked out about it so much on the recording that it went long, too long, in fact, to include on this episode. So I'm going to make that a special podcast episode or something like that and release it in a few weeks. But until then, registration is open now. And as I have said too many times to count on this episode, you can get your ticket at oatleyacademy.com/go/Rome. I would love to see you there. We are going to have a blast. Okay, so that brings us to the end of ArtCast 93. Thank you so much for listening and sharing the show. Until next time, stay strong and stay close. This podcast is a production of the Oatley Academy of Visual Storytelling. I'm Chris Oatley, your host and producer. Our editor is Kevin Chandler. Our production manager is Anya Marcos, and our editorial assistant is Ejua Ebeneba. Our theme music is provided by Storybook Steve. Recurring musical segments are provided by Storybook Steve and Kangaralian. Find more inspiring art and story podcasts designed to help you make a living from your own imagination at oatleyacademy.com/shows.